Okay, just give me the word. Or okay, we're recording.
Okay, I would like to open the Vineyard City Council. The day is October 30th, Wednesday, 2019, and the time is 8:53 p.m. We will, just to let you know, thank you for joining us online, and we are being recorded. We will move into, I don't believe we had a Pledge of Allegiance. Let's go ahead and do that, but I think we had a prayer. So, Chris, would you lead us in that? Thanks.
I'll stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will move into public comments. This is a time for people to come to the podium and talk about things with the City Council that are not on the agenda. As we've been here and had a lot of good discussion tonight, I do want to say that if anybody says anything that was a repetition of what happened before, I will have to use this mallet. So, yes, or the gavel, whatever you want to prefer to call it. Okay, seeing as there are none, we'll go ahead and move into our consent items. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve consent items 3.1 through 3.4.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move right into our business items, discussion and action on the town center. Now, Jake, our city manager, is going to walk us through the red line points and main discussion items, like an overview, very briefly, that just to make a concise, uniform discussion. Now, if the council has any questions or if we'd like to run through and just each make a comment, I would prefer that type of discussion. If you don't feel like a solution can be met tonight, let's state that and let's move forward. If you feel like there can be a discussion where solution can be met, then you may proceed.
I'm glad I have a podium to hide behind so I can avoid the mallet, because I will undoubtedly say something I've already said. First thing I'm going to do is just go through the agreement, show you guys the red lines really quick. We've identified that a lift station is probable in the town center, so we added that as backbone infrastructure. Some grammar changes, obviously, going through the agreement. We added a description of the changes to the district map. So that's relocating 12.19 acres of village office, identified in the map as VO 11, 10, and 9. Geneva Park is extended further to the south and is 29.86 acres. There's a 3-acre trail corridor that's running the length of the project adjacent to the railroad. So that makes up the difference of what the Geneva Park was presented in the town code and what it's being presented in the district map right now. Because 29.86 is less than what was presented in the code. The 1 acre plaza in the village office is being deleted from the map. We're exchanging that plaza for lot LF6 for a future civic use. It's a city hall. That's the plan that we're hoping to do, is have a city hall down there, back up against what Edge is doing, have the promenade there. We can share in some parking, and I think that's a good spot down there for the future city hall. It'll let us participate in the town center excitement. Going through.
Jake, sorry to throw you off, but on that one, do we need to designate it with a district, with a sub district, so that when it comes in, we're not having to go through a rezoning process? Because if it's just designated as promenade open space, then we're going to be going through a rezoning process to get into a public use.
Would civic use be allowed in the lakefront commercial?
Let me research that. I believe so, though. I think it's called institutional.
Okay. David, maybe you need to answer that question too. So we wanted quarterly updates from the developer. So they're planning on providing quarterly updates in the meetings. We identified that the annual reimbursement payments will come in April 1st each year. The available tax. One of the things that we noticed is that depending on how many residential units come in, the value that's created in the town center, and the timing of those two things may require an Alpine School District mitigation payment. If there's an Alpine School District mitigation payment, we wanted them to pay their pro rata share, and that came out of the available increment. So that's what's being identified here. There's a formula here that makes sure that it's equitable, and that's been presented to them, and I believe they're okay with that.
Jake, just really quick, to my knowledge, with everything that we've done, to my knowledge, we've never had to make a payment yet.
No,
is that correct?
Yeah, really quickly, the formula is really complicated, but what it says is that the Alpine School District will get $739.40 per student. It factors in the value of the RDA over time, how many units, or per unit, not per student. It factors in how many units exist within the RDA, how much value is created, what their 25% money that they're collecting, and then we have to make up 40% of whatever shortfall exists. And so every year we'll do a true up of the units that are created and the value that was created. And if it ever looks like there's going to be something due at the end, then that amount is split out over the remaining years. And so whatever we calculate as that annual amount due to Alpine School District, they would pay their share. We would pay their share out of the increment that they generate on the site.
But again, to my question,
there's never been.
We've not. So
it's close. So what happened is we got the power plant in the beginning. It was a huge chunk of increment. We've added units over time, and it started to eat into that excess. We're getting to the point now where the budgets are looking very close to zero. And so depending on, there's a lot of anomalies in the RDA, not just within their development, but depending on phasing and timing of all the stuff that's coming into the RDA, I'm seeing that there's a possibility there could be in the future.
Okay.
So we wanted to put that in here so that it was clear up front. I don't want to have any surprises, and that's one of the things that we've tried to do collectively, is make sure that we address everything up front so that we don't get into an issue where we have problems, because this is such an important site to both parties.
I just think it's important. Historically, I think everybody thought we were going to get there, especially the school district.
Yeah.
And we haven't.
The power plant's a huge component to that.
Okay.
So.
And so essentially what you're saying is if more commercial came in up front, there would be a chance that we wouldn't hit it still, but if residential goes in first, it sounds like we're going to hit it.
Well, and that
because of time, depending upon the timing of other commercial projects.
Yeah, that's also, depending on what comes in phase 3, phase 4, all of the other areas
right.
as well. So if development comes in, because we make relatively conservative budget estimates in the RDA as well. I forgot to start with this. Laura's still here. If you have any questions for her, will you let me know so that we can send her home? She's got a family at home, and I'd love to send her home. So if you guys don't have any questions for her, can we send her home?
Yeah, are there any questions for Laura? No? Thank you so much for coming. Okay.
So that's that red line. Payment requests have, so what we're saying here is interest will accrue on unreimbursed funds beginning from the date the payment requests have been approved by the agency staff. This accomplishes two things. There wasn't a payment request approval by cities or by agency staff. And so it does that, and then it really identifies when the interest component starts. So it makes it easier for me when I'm calculating interest payments and stuff like that. City staff will be included in the construction process, including but not limited to design, bidding, contractor selection, and all change orders. Agency will approve the budget and final design of Main Street and the Lake Promenade. This is the RDA acting as the completion bond, essentially. So if the punch list items are not rectified by developer within 90 days, the agency may elect to use available tax increment to rectify any remaining punch list items. It goes through a process that we have to work with them to identify anything at the end of a project. There really wasn't any teeth in the agreement, and so this provides some teeth for the city. I don't really see that becoming an issue because we've identified our role in the project through time, but this is there just in case.
Just along that line, so how does this affect bonding? Does bonding still happen the normal way?
Their contractors would still provide bonding for the project. This would just be if they don't complete it in a manner.
Right, we're not allowing the increment to be a warranty bond or anything
not a
like
warranty.
that.
This is a completely separate thing from a warranty bond. Yeah. I don't know if that's true. The tree types identified in the code, Morgan touched on this, shall be replaced by the approved Vineyard tree manual. So we can, I want to take out the included in the general plan. Morgan, you wanted to take out included in the general plan, just shall be replaced by the approved Vineyard.
Yeah, it's not the general plan. It's just having the reference the Vineyard tree manual is all we need.
Okay. And I believe that's it. Okay, so the other thing that's been added to this agreement is all of the exhibits are here.
So if we amend the tree plan, it'll just coincide with this?
Yeah.
Okay, and the other thing was the trail delineation for the Geneva Park. That's spelled out so that it's not coming out of the promenade.
Yeah, that's just an addition there. Yeah. Everything else will follow the code and the plan as it was adopted a few years ago. I have a few other comments that I've addressed with them. Clear definition for what structured parking is, and then clarifying that the structured fill and underground utilities are only reimbursable under the backbone infrastructure. So the structured fill and underground utilities are not going into the buildings or site-wide. It's just underneath what we identify as backbone infrastructure, which also includes the parking structures. And then with the parking structure reimbursement, the land costs would be treated the way land costs are treated with all the other backbone infrastructure. They would not be included in the reimbursable costs. Okay, any questions for me?
And Jake, I do have some language, because if we're going to do that, the Civic Center parcel, I've got some language that will basically actually allow us to use it if you want. So I just emailed it to you. I don't know if you want to, if we need to read it into the record, but I would recommend putting something in there.
You want to just read it?
Yeah, that's fine. The Civic Center parcel will be rezoned to lakefront commercial, and civic uses will be a permitted use in the use table 3.08.010 subsection 3. Civic uses are permitted through the institutional building type section 31080. So basically what that does, it allows the civic use to be a permitted use in the lakefront commercial, because right now it's not a permitted use, but also rezones it to to the lakefront commercial.
Would it also allow us to put the Civic Center or the City Hall backed up against the edge property and expand the promenade?
It's however we're defining the civic parcel in this, and so if we're defining that portion of the promenade as the civic parcel, then that's the portion that would be rezoned. So we would just need to amend the district map to reflect that change.
Okay, and we can do that in the agreement. So I think we should just do that whole piece as that civic parcel.
Yeah.
And and then the promenade can extend to the north.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Council, if you want to proceed, we can go through each council member and kind of have them speak and ask questions that you have. We can go down the line, or if you want to start, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. How do you want to do this? Do you want to just start from the beginning and go down?
I reserve the right to have you come back to me.
Yeah, that sounds great. I just think it's a good way to start.
So I guess I've got a lot of thoughts about this, but I think so much of everything that we've done and that I've had the privilege of participating in for the last 14 years is coming to this culminating point, which is to get a city center ultimately created and developed. If I go back and I think about all of the meetings that we used with all of the taxing entities to hammer out trying to get an RDA developed or an RDA established, ultimately it was so that we could reclaim this property. And to this point, yes, we've reclaimed some property, but to take this chunk of property, 300 and some odd acres, and reclaim it, and from my perspective, I think ultimately secure Vineyard's future. I'm super excited. So where I normally find myself getting into a lot of weeds, we've spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of time as a council with Planning Commission, with hired staff, with other experts that we brought in when we went through trying to make a decision about, do we establish a form-based code? I can't tonight tell you exactly why we settled on the percentages that we did, but I promise you the city council didn't pull those numbers out of a hat and say we recommend 80%. That didn't happen. That number came as a recommendation from the experts that we'd hired to help us come up with a number to say the best chance that you have to succeed in trying to create a TOD development. And then they gave us those recommended numbers. We traveled to Dallas. We traveled to Portland. Stuart, I think you were with us when we went to Portland. I've never been to Portland. I've only been to a handful of places, right? And so for me to be able to go see what some of these other places have done in Texas and in Portland was absolutely eye-opening to me. And once my vision was stretched about what was possible, there's no way to bring it back. And that's, as that happened for us, those of us that participated at that time, it directed us, it guided us to get to this point where we said we want to go a different direction. And ultimately we settled on this form-based code. I can't even begin to describe how big of a decision that was. When we go from just vacant ground and 150 people to say, we're going to go do something potentially that's never been done in the state of Utah. And we're going to do it right here in Vineyard. It was potentially a little bit arrogant, but ultimately we all felt, and I still feel, that it's the right direction. And to bring that density in from all of the experts that we had come talk to us, it is our best chance to ultimately succeed as a community. And so I guess just, that's the 30,000 foot statement that I want to say. I'm excited about that we're finally to that point where we're going to be able to see some things really start to happen. And that vision that we've had for so long has an opportunity to really come to pass. some of the specific things that we talked about tonight that were mentioned. I feel like that we've got, we're working with developers that I think want to work with us, that there can be some give and take. And so while I want there to be enough detail that we're protected, I also feel like we need to have enough flexibility that we can, future councils can make changes that are going to be in the best interest of the community. So when I started to see the progression of, how do we go about doing parking structures? I'm in favor of that. If it requires that we're compacting things a little bit more, I'm in favor of us doing that. Again, from everything that the experts that have come to us, that have given us input, that is our best opportunity to succeed. So I like the tiered structure, and maybe we'll get into some more detail with what that potentially looks like tonight. But I like where we're headed with that. The backbone pieces, I guess originally I was a little bit reserved with where we were headed with the financing of some of those pieces. But as I sit back and I look at what was this RDA created for? Primarily it was created for infrastructure. It was created for cleanup. And any incentive is kind of the third piece of that. And so I started to say to myself that this is the main area. If we we're incentivizing the cleanup and we're incentivizing infrastructure, and if that consumes almost all of it, whoever's coming on the outside of it, they're not going to get it. And I'm okay with that, because we're putting it where I think we really need it. Because if we can make the city center succeed and thrive and flourish, all the stuff on the outside is going to come. And we won't have to sit there and worry about we're trying to incentivize those other players that may come along, because we've put it into the heart of the city. Yeah, I'll leave it right there for now.
Jake, did you want to quickly review the tier structure so that people can understand?
We discussed the tiered structure this morning. That was something that came up today. So I put my computer will turn on. I put some numbers, I threw out some numbers in a meeting today, and I put some additional numbers together in this spreadsheet. I don't know. I wanted to put the numbers together to see what these how many stalls you could get with the increment that we're generating or we're planning on generating. And so I think in the meeting we talked about getting to 100% at 4,000. Okay. So I've increased that to see if we can afford to do 6,000 stalls. I don't think it will. I don't see it penciling in the RDA agreement any more than 6,000 stalls. I did a shot in the dark at 4,000, and maybe that's the number that makes sense. I don't know. So I think that's just going to be a conversation with these guys. So let me throw the spreadsheet up and show you kind of what I'm looking at from a financing perspective. So in our discussions with them, they've identified the roadways and underground utilities as a $25 million number. Pete and Nate, if I misspeak on any of this stuff, bring it up. This is the first time that they're seeing this spreadsheet. So, that's a lie. I showed Pete for about 2 minutes before this meeting started. The sewer lift station is a $2 to $3 million project. And then the promenade, this is the reimbursable portion, obviously, is at $9 million. The cost estimates that we have from when we were working with the Forge estimated parking structures between 13 and 17 with a safe range at 15,000 per stall. So I've taken the structured parking costs here at 2,000 and put in what that 2,000 stalls would cost. If you come down here, you've got 37 million in infrastructure. That's these three numbers added together. And 30 million in parking is the sum of these here. That's the formula. So the total is 67 million. So infrastructure reimbursement, parking reimbursement. I built this spreadsheet so that we can kind of work on the numbers in the meeting. But as it goes over, you can see here, you get to 75 million if you have 5,000 stalls. And that's 112 million in infrastructure. So then if you come down here, you can see the infrastructure reimbursement percentage is 100%. That's our recommendation. And then this would be that tier that we had talked about. I think in the meeting we said 2,000 60%, 3,000 70. I can't remember what we said. 4,000 was 100. Okay, so the numbers are a little bit different here. We can play with those numbers however we want to. Well, yeah, I built it with some flexibility so that we can show the numbers. Anyway, so this is the total reimbursement. This is the increment that would be available if all of the assumptions in this model are true. So again, what brought me to this point was initially I was concerned that we were incentivizing the residential component. We weren't incentivizing the commercial component. I was concerned that we would get 2 parking structures and that was it. They would only build what made sense to build, and then nothing else would get built. Everything else would be surface parked, and in my mind the RDA would have failed. And so doing this tiered structure incentivizes them to build that next 1,000 stalls, or if you go down to 500, it incentivizes them to build the next 500 stalls, and it does it over time and builds that increment back on the parking structures they've already built. And so it gives them that added incentive to keep going, keep investing. And when I looked at that shared parking analysis, and looked at both the residential and the commercial side, and realized that they truly are taking a risk and jumping in with both feet about doing this mixed use. Because if you don't have the mixed use, there's no increment to not only reimburse the parking structures, let alone the 39 million or 37 million of other infrastructure costs that are going to be put in up front. So to me, that's what brought me to this point where I felt comfortable doing a tiered structure and getting to the point that we would be reimbursing 100% of the parking costs. So with that, if there's more questions or if you guys have anything you want to say, but does that work for you? Is that what you wanted to hear?
Does anyone have any questions about this?
So I don't know when the right time to talk about the ratios are, but I mean, if we want to circle back to that.
Okay, yeah, we can. Let me change these really quick to what we talked about. If you guys have other questions while I'm doing this, or you can sit and we can play some Jeopardy music.
Nate, did you have something?
Yeah, I do have a quick question. So at the very bottom of that, Jake, you're showing just a single increment number. I didn't see any increment increases as it's going across.
That's the total generated over the life. So that's with those assumptions. I can get you the, that's assuming, that's a good point. Let me point that out. So this is the assumption that they're going to build 5,273 units over time. Why is that 3 million?
Because when you put in a bunch more parking stalls, that gives you a bunch more commercial and retail.
Oh, okay.
Because commercial and retail is directly correlated with parking. The more parking
That-
structures you have, the more commercial and retail you get. So we're incentivized because in this model,
He's not going to be on the recording.
am I right?
I'm not going to be on the recording.
Go sit over there by the table. Go sit over there by the table. Yeah,
I don't want to jump in.
he can't have another.
At least you got more than one slide.
Yeah, and I forgot what I was even talking about.
You better be on this other side, Nate, because the mics don't work very well.
So the parking structures for us are directly correlated with how much commercial and retail you get. And if you don't build commercial and retail in this, you don't get paid back for the amount of money we're putting in. And so, and part of that, frankly, is just the way that property tax is structured in Utah. We get a 55% discount for residential use. And so even if the value is, let's say $200,000 for a residential unit, you only pay tax on 55% of that, or 45% of that. 55. You get a 45% discount, thanks. And in commercial, you get no discount. In retail, you get no discount. So really the tax increment for us only really makes sense. And we feel like if we build these residential units, there will be this big demand for commercial and retail. We can create this space that will create an area that retailers want to be at. Retailers say that the two biggest components of a retailer coming are rooftops, number one, and foot traffic, number two. You can have the rooftops, but if they never come out of their house and into your shops, obviously you're not going to do anything. And then the third component is how much disposable income do they have? Those are the three things that they look at when they're going to an area. And we feel like with Vineyard, we've all been working on trying to get retailers into the city, and we feel like with this site, this will be a game changer for retailers. And they've already told us that. They say, well, once this we know it's approved, we're going, but now they're seeing grading, they're starting to call us again and say, oh, wow, when are these units all going to start coming? And we feel like that's going to be a big boon to the city in sales tax, and then long-term for the tax increment to generate to pay back all this stuff.
Yeah, so the assumptions that are being made is you're adding 500 residential units and 75,000 square feet of non-residential, so retail, commercial, office, for the first 3 years. Then you go to 150,000 square feet a year. So to conceptualize that, 150,000 square feet, the in-structure building in PG is 190,000 square feet. So you're adding one of those a year in the town center. This was Laura's biggest concern, is can they meet this non-residential structure? She thought this was really aggressive, but again, they're the ones taking the risk that they can meet this. So 150,000 every year until year 10, at which point you add 225 each year, which is really aggressive, until year 18, and then it's 75.
And this was based, so you were asking why it went to 3 million square feet. Was it based off of the number of stalls?
Additional parking stalls that you'll get here, yeah.
So was your number on the other page based off of 3 million or 1.8? The total increment.
I think it's pulling the value from this number here, 156 million, which is the remaining increment after you give the 75 or 25% to the other taxing entities and the 5% to administration. It's the total value is 156, and to Nate's point, that is shown here as 253 the first year, 803 second year, 1.3, 2.1.
Oh, so that's the cumulative.
That's the cumulative amount.
Right.
And so you can see here, as you go along, you get to almost $9 million in value at the end.
Okay.
So, but if you do a present value calculation, that's what's happening here, is a present value calculation of those future cash flows. So this is, I think I've got, so this is what was presented earlier, or this is the idea that I had. would be 70% for 1,000 stalls, 80% for 2,000, 90% for 3,000, 100% for 4,000. And obviously, their side, they want to see these as low as possible. We would like to see as much as possible, with the caveat that we don't want to force something that doesn't exist.
What's the correlating number based off of that scenario with the total square footage? That number that changes on the other
It won't
tab.
change based on this. We changed that number assuming that we were incentivizing parking. So if you don't incentivize parking at all,
Correct.
then it would.
Correct. So what you're saying is when you change those numbers of units, or I'm sorry, numbers of stalls, you were surprised that it went from 1.8 to 3 million. That's not adjusting as you do this?
No, it's not.
Okay. So this assumption is still based off of 3 million square feet.
Yep.
So you obviously won't have that amount of tax increment if you don't build the 3 million square feet, which I think Jake's.
Yeah, and I guess my question is what does 4,000 stalls equate to generally for commercial square feet?
So you need 5 stalls per 1,000.
Yeah.
Per 1,000 square feet. So 4,000 stalls would be 2 million square feet of. Is that my math?
Yeah, but you're also but this doesn't. Obviously, you have a lot of other surface parking and street parking that's on top of that. So you can get with 4,000 structured parking stalls, you can get that ample amount. You're going to be more than 2 million square feet of non-residential, if there's a market for it, And so our risk is, and this is the kind of thing we've been grappling with, is unfortunately we're going to have to make the decision to pay for structured parking well before we're going to see how much tax increment there is. We may not build structured parking day one. We might do some temporary lots, and then so that we're not accruing that interest to the RDA right immediately. However, we're going to have to pull the trigger on that before we're going to know how much increment there's going to be. So that's why we were saying, well, let's not do this tiered structure. Let's just say you pay for 100% of structured parking for the first ones, just so we're more incentivized to build the first one. But, after going through this, it made more sense so if the market does slow and we've built one parking structure and it's on the teetering edge of whether it pencils or not, we're encouraged to build the next 1,000 because it grows, increases the reimbursement for us. So we felt like that was a fair idea that the city had.
Tice, are there other questions about this specifically right now?
I'm good.
Okay. Tice?
I'll just add, this is my first effort for the city. As a citizen, I inserted myself in this committee after being part of the citizen-driven referendum because of what we perceived as way too many apartments. And that works sort of well. I spent all summer with this. This was a dream. And I think I'm pleased that we now have a developer that shares the dream. And this is a risk for all of us. This could be a disaster.
But, I believe in it. I think you guys believe in it. I like what's been done with the agreement. I think you've shown your vision in the agreement. You've engendered a larger measure of trust. There are some other issues still there. And on that basis, I'm going to go on the acceptance of what I said to you the last meeting, that this is a joint effort. We're both involved. We both have a great deal at stake. And this is not, you're going to walk out of here and do it. We're involved to the bitter end, as it were. And so I like that we're still there. We still make input. We still have the ability to make this work given what might arise within the next year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. So this is a living situation. It's not cast in stone. I don't know about the equation of percentages. I have no clue. I'm not trained in that. I know we have to have population down there for it to work. I've lived in enough parts of the world. I've lived in Europe where the towns live above the stores, and where the streets were not cars, they were walkways. I've lived in those places. I know they work. It's a question of whether or not we can get our people to make that sea change. I'm old enough, I've seen how this society acquainted itself. I came back to America in the 50s when cars all of a sudden were available to everybody. I went to the first large shopping mall in New Jersey, okay, which was out in the middle of nowhere. And everybody drove their cars there. And that's the society we've built. But now, look at Provo, shopping malls are collapsing, okay? All of a sudden, we get milkmen delivering milk again. My wife gets hamburgers delivered. Our society's changing, okay? And this fits that. So I have faith in this. I'm willing to cast my vote that your expert is right. If he's not, oh well, I guess my grave will be decorated with unkind things. So thank you for your efforts. Have patience with us because we're going to have disagreements coming. That's a given, okay? We'll listen to yours and you listen to ours and we'll hammer out what we need to do. But I agree with what's been done. I thank Jake for his sleepless nights in my last 2 days.
Chris, did you want to go next?
Yes. So the question I still have, and we've talked about this a little bit, and I know we've said maybe we look at it at a different point, but I never like paying interest. I get you guys are putting it up front, and I understand that side of it. And so, especially with like Main Street, if there were available funds that the RDA had right now, we talked about this before, us being able to front those funds and not be accruing interest up front, I would like some mechanism in here for us to do that, but also for the ability, like I talked about before, of removing that edge piece out if we do that.
So, I believe that there is a mechanism in there that we can build, but we have the option to build the macro.
Right, but I'm saying that the piece that I don't see in there is, because what we have to do is shuffle funds from one project to another, show that there's increment coming in to repay those funds that might be charged to us in 5 or 6 years. To do that, we'd have to pull out that edge piece. I feel like to do that, Jake, is that fair to say? And so I don't see in the agreement the ability for us to do that other than coming back and doing an amendment, which I don't think you guys are going to want to do. So there's nothing in there to do it.
Was that all you had to add, or did you have something additional?
Today, when Chris and I met with them, we discussed the Main Street component. We also discussed pulling the edge piece out of this agreement entirely. And their main concerns with pulling the edge piece out was part of that edge piece was intended to do some improvements on the promenade, and part of it was that they would like the city to front load the cost for Main Street, because that wasn't in their budgets initially. Front loading, they were thinking the whole time that the city was front loading the cost for Main Street, so that's a significant contribution that they weren't planning on. So we discussed that as a potential negotiation. If the city front loaded the cost for Main Street up front, we could pull the edge piece out and then replace that funding that we're using for Main Street, because we have with these guys, again, an agreement on the east side. There's funds tied up by approval and contracts with the RDA board
That are already bonded for and
bonded
money
for and
sitting.
sitting in accounts that we can't spend without their approval. And we could spend that money to do Main Street, but we've got to reimburse it somehow. And if we took the edge piece out, that could be the mechanism that we reimburse that account and refund. So that's what Chris is talking about. That's why, David, in the agreement, it doesn't.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't say it so eloquently. I need a monster drink, so.
No. So I think that's right, and we would be fine with that. And David, you're right as well. I mean, the agreement already provides for the ability for the RDA board or for the city to do any of these improvements on their own without us that they want to do. Your point is that if that is one of the ones you choose to do and you front load that cost, with money already set aside, you need a mechanism to replenish that account because it is earmarked to be spent in the future
On the east side.
on the east side.
Correct. And
So
yes.
if that's the appropriate mechanism to do that, we would be fine removing that lakefront residential piece from the reimbursement boundaries.
Do you know what's attributable to that?
Just
The base improvement costs. Okay. So you take the whole promenade, take that 1.2 million that they're putting into the
You
promenade.
need to be in the microphone.
Take
so because the edge improvements, the edge increment was going to go to pay for it. Not that just
Their proportionate share.
Would you?
So if they generate 15 million, say their promenade improvement portion is 3 million.
As the whole site, or as? So, I think we're getting into the weeds, obviously, and we need to, but that could be a really complicated. So we probably just need to come up with a number.
So maybe it's what's the amount of money that we have to borrow? 6 on the other side.
There's how much money is programmed? I don't. There's a component of that piece that I know is about 5 years away.
You know how much that is?
I don't.
So maybe we say if we can work out something on the whatever portion is available in that bond, and you use whatever that portion is to front cost for Main Street or whatever.
I need you in a microphone.
Sorry. What was I talking about?
Yeah. So if
Front loading, side loading.
yeah, so if there's something in the agreement that can allow.
Yeah, okay, I remember now. Yeah, so if we refer to something in the agreement that references if we can work something out with the city on releasing some of the bonding capacity that's being held for future use on the east side, and whatever that amount is used on the west side for Main Street and promenade improvements, then the edge parcel can be released from this, and the increment can then. I mean, we'd love
For us to use our own money.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, we're on board with that.
Jake, am I off, or is that something that we want to be able to do?
As long as it doesn't obligate us to do it, we can look at the agreement and make sure it makes sense.
Right, and I think that's all I want us to do is to be able to have something in here so that we can look at that, and if it works for both of us, we can make. I just don't want to have to go amend this agreement afterwards to do that. But if we can front load it and reduce an accruing interest payment, I would rather do that now. Well, you can take an additional $4 or $5 million and put it somewhere else on the property. Yeah.
Now, as to the current language of the agreement, as Pete referenced, there's a section in there that gives us the option to build any of these and take them off their obligation. I don't think we need to put the details of that, what you're suggesting and they're saying is a good idea, into this agreement right now. I think the appropriate way to do it is, assuming this agreement's done, and assuming down the road we do the analysis and say we prefer to do Main Street, they would like to be let off the obligation. For us to do Main Street without them doing it, we would negotiate that agreement as part of that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
Because that kind of thing will come up over and over as we go forward.
I think hearing what I've heard on public record tonight from you, and I think that's something that would be beneficial to you and would be beneficial to us if we can make it work. That helps me feel more comfortable.
Did you have anything you wanted to? You're comfortable. Okay. Okay, are there further questions or comments? Yeah, go on.
So, Don, this is for you back there. So one of the things I started to think about as we've got a lot more roads in here than what we had initially thought about, but we still only have just 2 access points to the entire site, right? 3.
There's one at the very north.
Oh, that's right. Way. Yeah, that's right. Way up there. So I just want to make sure that from our, from an engineering standpoint, that that you're comfortable, our staff is comfortable, that we've got sufficient to be able to handle this. I know that we're probably not going to get another access point along Vineyard Connector. That was going to be a no-go. We're not going to get that. We got what we've got, but I just want to make sure that as we, those connections to Vineyard Connector, that, I don't know. I mean, we've got to stack that or stage that or whatever to make sure that we don't have failing intersections at critical times, right?
Well, I think the most important thing is if you're gonna be relegated to 3 intersections, we have to build the roads big enough to handle the volumes during peak day demands. So some of these roads may have to be 3-lane roads instead of a 2-lane road. But I think that we can work through that as we develop the plan and figure out how we're going to move traffic around. By putting the grid system in, it helps a lot, except on Main Street, because with every intersection you slow traffic down, and that slows movement through the town center area. So my concern is Main Street and making sure that flows well, and also that buses have a way to get in and out without having to clog the artery. Because I think that's the other thing. We have promised UTA that we would give them bus service into the station. And if we stick them at a location where we have a very short road for them to sit on while they're waiting to get through, we're going to clog that road so bad that we won't be able to use it at all.
So with that comment, is there potentially some of this where we're going to end up where we potentially do something with them like is being done up through University Parkway, where they're at certain intersections buses are allowed to move through, and we're able to do something like that in here as well?
Well, that's what I'm hoping for. When we sit down and talk to Jeff Speck and we figure out what he wants as far as walkable community, then we will work out, well, this road and this road is critical. We need to make these a little bit wider. The rest, we can work through that, I think, and still give us what we want as far as walkability, but still give us the volume of traffic we need to get at.
So I guess the other thought is that potentially in that first block, so as you turn off a Vineyard Connector and you go north on Main Street, maybe that first block potentially is lanes wider than everything else, so that you're able to come in and ultimately come out. And same with on the other end.
Yeah, well, so that first intersection, I would really like to move farther to the north to give us more queue area there, and also figure out how we can flow traffic on the loop that goes to the train station. So we may have a dedicated left turn, and then the through lane be a different lane. So we have to work, and we can work that out as we're looking at laying this out. I think I've talked to Nate and Pete both about moving that road back, and both of them said they were very willing to look at doing that so that we have the queue length that we need for traffic to come in and also for traffic to go out. Because even the hail study that Ryan Hales did for them, it still showed us needing a queue of over 1,000 feet during peak day demand, which was in the evenings, to get traffic out at the Main Street Vineyard Connector entrance there. So we'll work those out. But
okay.
So Nate, if I can just address that quickly, and Don, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think with the traffic engineering studies that we did and working with the engineering department, we have a plan that works, and we're hoping to make it better. Is that accurate?
the only place I really have a concern is that first road. Otherwise, I would agree.
And I think one more point with that is that's why the agreement got added that Main Street gets approved. We have to work with city staff and engineer on design of that before obviously any construction starts. So that still protects you if And we're on board because the last thing we want is to have the main entrance fail in the whole community. So we appreciate Don's wisdom more than ourselves.
Jake, you mentioned you wanted to make a comment about the ratios and how it works with the city when we were talking.
You're talking about the residential to commercial.
That's right.
Okay. I think I kind of addressed it earlier, but I'll reiterate what I think I said or what I need to say. To me, the ratio discussion was less concerning when I started to look at this project as standalone projects. So if I look at the residential development, it doesn't support structured parking. If I look at the commercial development, it doesn't support structured parking. The only way you get a cohesive plan that is structured park is if they do what they are promising to do, which is multi-use, dense urban downtown. So to me, we're incentivizing a mix of uses by incentivizing structured parking. More than any other incentive that we could provide, we're incentivizing that mix through the structured parking component, in my opinion. Because standalone, they don't support structured parking. They only support it through that shared use.
And can I add that I think the vision that's been talked about, I mean, if we went as is and said, okay, we're not incentivizing anything other than maybe Main Street, right, and the promenade, I think we missed the mark, personally. I think that's not what was intended with the form-based code. It was planned to be dense, and so the only way for us to incentivize that is actually through structured parking. And I like the ratios that we've come up with. I think that gives an incentive for you to get to the next tier, which only means we'll get more commercial. Because as is, we get 500,000 square feet of commercial and 5,200 units, and that's not what the vision was.
Okay, and the last thing I don't feel like we covered from our last meeting was how the basic open space will be paid for. So in the code, it says that as open space is being kind of taken care of and defined, there's a max about how much is able to be, like, you can, let me try to articulate this. I know you know what I'm trying to say.
So Morgan can probably help us also. So wake up, Morgan. 20% open space is required.
Yes.
It can go down to 15% or
10%.
It can go down to 10% through incentives or through
The immediate parcels adjacent to the promenade, as Pete pointed out, originally each one of those was going to get phased in with the development of that parcel. The promenade would get phased in, but with the development of the entire promenade, the code anticipates kind of incentivizing that and allows for those parcels to actually reduce all the way down to zero. Now, most likely they're still going to have open space because the project's going to be terrible if you don't have a little bit of open space. But the rest of the development can get reductions down to 10% if they improve certain things. There's like the Main Street and the Promenade intersection. That's huge in the code. So if that thing's buffed up and made to be really excellent with urban plazas on all the corners, then they can get a further reduction. The planner can reduce it for public art, for a lighting plan, for wayfinding signage, for things like that. The more improvements they provide, the more reductions can be provided.
I think specifically you're asking about Geneva Park, though.
I just want to know the mechanism for paying for the park.
So,
I'm sorry.
No, that is what I was talking about, and I didn't know if we were trying to transfer that into the Geneva Park area to see how much was being taken care of. You just answered my question.
The code definitely allows that. If they, I don't think we're anticipating they do that now, but if they wanted to, that would be a way for them to reduce on-site parking.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Open space.
Well, I think one component of this too is it allows for us to reduce open space down to 10%, but we're already providing well more just with the Geneva Park and with the promenade and with the trail corridors on both sides, and then what we're planning on doing with the state down on the lake commercial. So that's obviously our concern, is to have as many people there and to make it walkable. It's going to have plazas. It's going to have some of these other additional things inside of these. These were just the main backbone ones. There will be plenty more in the plans that we're sketching with DPZ right now. And when they come for a charrette, we'd invite all of you and anyone, planning commission staff, everyone to be involved in that process and come with ideas on how we can do that. Because like Ty said earlier, we see this as well as, we're working together on this moving forward. It's not like we're going to leave here and we have nothing to build. This is just getting the kind of the skeleton done. Then we can all work together on saying this makes sense or this, and we're open to all ideas.
So my question then is, with that being said, what would the mechanism be for paying for it?
So we talked about Geneva Park and where it was on the priority list. And so right now, in the current structure of this agreement, there is not a funding mechanism for Geneva Park. One of the things that we talked about is we have seen economies of scale with the cleanup on that site. And one of the things that we could possibly do with some additional money left over from those projects is cap that site. So, we could potentially put some base improvements down. We really don't know what Geneva Park looks like, and so until we design it, we won't know what those base improvements look like. But you could utilize money from other phases of the RDA. You could use fund balance. But right now, the way the agreement's structured, there is not a funding mechanism for Geneva Park.
Okay. Are there any questions about the open space? No? Okay. So there's a possibility of cleanup funds being left over. Okay. Are there any other comments that the council wanted to make or any questions left over? No? Okay, so I feel like we've wrapped up everything. Did you guys have any additional things to say? My plan is that when we change faces into the RDA board, that we won't have any discussion. Is that going to happen?
What's the ratio? What are the stalls required? What's the reimbursement for those stalls?
What's your recommendation?
I might need a week. Yeah. Honestly, I spitballed those numbers earlier. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know. I can't say with any relative certainty that 4,000 stalls was more than what they were anticipating to build. I don't know. I can tell you what's required by the code, but beyond that, I don't know.
Remind us again what you originally showed us and what they would like.
Well, so just to be clear, it's not what we would like, it was what we talked about before.
Yeah.
What we would like is 100%.
At the beginning. Understood.
So, what we've talked about as we've talked through, and there's a little bit of a disconnect between when Jake expressed his concerns at the beginning and when we were expressing our concerns, because Jake and I had several rounds of discussions where we just said the same thing over and over again, where I would say, well, this is my concern. Jake said, yeah, I get it, but this is my concern. I'd say, no, I get it, but this is my concern. And so, it took a little while for me to really understand what Jake was really saying. And I think what this does, what the tiered structure does with the 70, 80, 90, 100 is it strikes a balance between creating an incentive, an increasing incentive for us to provide more parking, which directly relates to more commercial and more retail, and not having it so onerous that it actually creates a disincentive because it closes the gap between a parking structure and surface parking so closely that we say the risk to building that parking structure is too great. There's not a big enough incentive to do it. And when the wind starts blowing, we're the only ones that have climbed out on that limb, and it's just not worth doing. And so I personally, I mean, when we were in the meeting, I said no, Nate said yes, and I've kind of come around to this is a fair treatment of ensuring what the city wants, which is more parking structures, and not being so aggressive that it ends up being counterproductive and creating a disincentive that really in reality makes it so we build less or no parking structures.
So why don't we split the difference and go to 4,500 at the 100%?
Yeah, because I could barely stomach 4.
Well, good thing we get to vote.
I know.
500. Oh, let me finish. 500 parking stalls is not too much. We're splitting hairs. I get it. I get what you're saying. It just seemed like an easy number to me because Jake originally said 5,000. Yes, in the meeting I was there, and I can vouch that he was spitballing. He just threw numbers at a board, and he did say that he had no idea. And I appreciate you confirming that we still don't know. But I don't know. That just seemed easy for me because I could split the difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, full disclosure, it was late last night, and I was trying to come up with a way that I felt incentivized what we were trying to incentivize. This structure made the most sense to me.
Just for the public and the people that think that, we've been working on this for a really long time, and we came to this decision because we came up with a myriad of different alternatives that we could do to make this fair. Why did you spitball 4,000, and what does that mean to the people who are listening who don't really know why you would just shoot out 4,000,
Well, 4,000 is, it's $60 million. And so...
and what does that translate into commercial, Like, how does it...
That was the $2 million number I asked earlier.
Yeah. Right. For this conversation, I just wanted to make it really confusing.
Yeah, so truly in my mind, there wasn't a lot of science put into how many and what the reimbursement was for each. It was more the structure that I was trying to present. If it ends up that those numbers are what we agreed to, great. It's requiring them, if you do 4,000 units and you reimburse 100%, that's requiring the developer to put in $97 million up front, with the potential of getting reimbursed that $97 million, because based on those fairly aggressive assumptions in the model, they will only get reimbursed what they put in. This is not a profit center, so they won't get additional money if they create additional increment. If they get paid back, they get paid back. There is an interest component, so they get paid back that component plus interest. But once that's paid back, it's paid back, and all of the additional increment created goes back to the RDA board. And so it's within the amount of increment that's being generated. So it seems feasible to me to do 4,000 units or 4,000 parking stalls. But that's kind of what started that. And now more for me, the analysis was, does a tiered structure work? And I wanted to talk to them about whether or not a tiered structure worked.
Well, Jay, if you just look at the code from just the parking standpoint, that would provide 800,000 square feet of office. Now, with the shared parking mechanism, that's something that we've talked about. The code does allow for that, and so they get substantially more by sharing parking with residential. So you start getting more value, and you could actually, going off of more of a TOD standard and not a suburban office standard, you're going to get quite a bit more. So it provides a ton of capacity for commercial uses.
No, I was just going to say, even though you were spitballing and we're using that word and that may make people listening uncomfortable, I think your instincts and intuition and the time you spent on this were good, and I think the numbers are good. Let's do this.
So, is there a scenario? I mean, earlier I think here we're saying 2 million. Earlier we were saying 3 million, right? So, what is
This doesn't stop them from putting additional parking structures in. This is just it's essentially what we're saying with this incentive would be if you get 4,000 stalls of structured parking in the downtown, we've succeeded. We're okay with that. We're okay with that. There's a good chance that it could go beyond that. If you have 3 million square feet of commercial and 5,200 units, you could build additional parking structures. There will be surface parking in this development, and there shouldn't be an assumption that there won't be.
And that parking will be wrapped and
and
nicely done.
And it won't be reimbursable. Surface parking is not reimbursable in the agreement.
Any other questions on that? No? We feel good about it? Okay, well, just to, I guess I just want to say something really quick at the end of all of this. A lot of work has gone into this, like Nate mentioned, and Tice. This has been something historical for our city that we've gone through for a really long time. And each week we've put into a lot of work and effort into trying to figure out and hone these numbers. I wanted to mention something about walkability, because while it does make our economy very healthy and kind of a fun place, some people are like, well, what about the cars? And other people are really excited about walking and they don't want as many parking spaces. But I just wanted to say this, walkability is really focused on within our city because it makes us, or it gives us economic vitality. It makes us self-sustaining. We're a really small city next to a really big city, and we're at the crossroads of state and federal highways and transit projects. And in order for this to work, and we have a huge cleanup site that we need to do. This is the redevelopment agency that we've been talking about. In order to clean up that site and then make us sustainable as a city, we've had to have these different types of housing. We have to have the town center. That's what we were emphasizing in order to pay for the cleanup and in order to make us a sustainable city that has good economic vitality. And Anthony Jenkins mentioned that we need to make these connections, and Jeff Knighton made this discussion or comment that we need to make these connections through the city, and that's in our general plan. And everything ties into the city center from the very south of our city to the east and the west and the north. We have planned for people to be able to get to these locations in a walkable, bikeable manner that makes our city self-sustaining. So that's what I wanted to add to it. If there are no other comments, though, I'd like to call for a motion.
Sorry, I'm gonna. You guys are gonna hate me here, but as I think about this, I'm thinking about. Go back to this parking thing. If that last piece, to go back to the previous idea of saying 4,500, if that last piece is to 4,500, I guess I want this to succeed, and I really believe it will. I think I'm not going to go into all those reasons, but I believe we will. If the first tiers are the way they were, and this very last one just bumps that up 500, can we not make that work?
I think I can speak on behalf of both of us here probably, because when I agreed to 4,000 this morning when we left, Pete ran me through the financial models, and he knows these better than I do, and he said that's too risky to build. To get to that point, we're going way out on the limb. And so I think, when we look at it, it's like, well, 500 stalls, that's $7.5 million. And what that means for increment, though, is that's another probably $100 or $200 million of facilities that have to go in to pay for that. And so although it seems small, I really feel like, and Jake just tossed that number out there, but as you look at the models, it really is pushing us to the outer limit of where it's making us very uncomfortable to get there. So we already feel like, I guess at 4,000 we're stretching, and that's not a negotiation tactic. That's just simply where the numbers are on our end. And so I think, and once again, then we'd be, if we're at 3,000, it's to build the 45, now all of a sudden, instead of saying it's another $15 million to get from 3,000 to 4,000, you'd have to go from 3,000 stalls to 4,500 stalls. So now that additional investment you're talking about there is 22, and is that what it is? 22.5 million, if I'm doing my math right. You know, so it's just disincentivizing us from building that last 1,000 units, and that's where it's going to be. You know, earlier on, it's going to be less critical because there obviously will be some structured parking that makes sense. It's just getting to that outer limit, and I just think it's probably counterproductive to what we both want in the end, which is more structured parking. Hopefully, we build 10,000 structured parking stalls, and there's 5 million square feet of office and commercial, and we get Amazon headquarters number 3 down there, and you know, I mean, that's what we're all hoping for and shooting for. It's just, I think we're at that outer limit, and I mean, Pete can disagree with me if he wants, but that's where I think we probably are at.
And Nate, just to reiterate what the other Nate was saying, is I think kind of like when we were talking about the scale of how big this is, and it's easy to kind of forget the perspective. It's really easy to forget the perspective on the parking stalls because there's a multiplication factor when you're talking about the cost, and then you're dividing by such a small fraction when you're talking about the increment. And so the amount of additional facility, the amount of additional facilities you have to build to be able to pay that $7.5 million, it just, like Nate said, it starts to become counterproductive.
So maybe I'm missing something here. So I mean, let's just say it's wildly successful and it requires more.
Yeah.
What are we reimbursing above the 4,000?
Whatever we build. Whatever we build.
That would be
100%.
So everything's going to be 100% above 4,000.
I'm with you.
So the idea was, and the problem that Jake was trying to solve for, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, was that we build too few parking structures. We pick the low hanging fruit, and then service park the rest of it. And so what we've tried to do is create an increasing incentive program that would help us be more incentivized to build the next one. And then you get to a point where you say, hey, we're thrilled. This turned out as well as anybody could have imagined, and if it turns out better, then even better.
Okay.
I forgot. I do have one more comment. David, could you come to the microphone really quick? I had a question for you. I forgot to address your concern, but I wanted to before we end their night. So, you had mentioned really quick about some of the ratios, and I was just wondering, I wanted you not to rehash, but I really want to understand why you felt like the ratios should be different. And the reason why I say this is because I took a lot of time to research this before this meeting. It was one of my first questions a couple months ago, and then a couple days ago I had this question and talked about it a lot and read a ton of stuff on it, and I really want to understand your thoughts.
My concern has been that if we're allowed to build 80% residential, that we would, and in fact it would end up with a number of single-purpose buildings that were, some little boutique shops in the bottom, and then residential all the way up, and not really meeting the needs or the intention of having 20% of commercial. Also, it just my concern is we've done a mixed use experiment before, and at Edgewater, and those that whole area ended up being just all residential in one spot and a big open field in the other. It never got developed until now. It's now starting to be developed, and I was concerned that we may have something like that happen again, especially considering that we have a lot of pressure on us to build low cost housing. I could see a scenario we have building upon building of low cost housing, and that would meet the requirements that we set forth in the building code, but not the vision. That's my concern.
Okay. So with the Edgewater project, I feel like they're very different. Mm-hmm. Where you don't actually have the mix, they're next to each other, right?
But the intention was to make the mixed, but they didn't do it that way.
But it wasn't in the code.
The code was regional mixed use, but allowed to have separate you didn't have to mix them. They were mixed in the sense that in that region, they could just plop an apartment building here and plop anything where they wanted to. What happened was and Nate, maybe you can speak better to this than me, it just happened that the residential plopped where it did and the commercial plopped where. So there was no requirement that they had to. So that was my understanding.
And I know some of the residential that was built first, and it took a long time to get around to the commercial part. Second.
Which is also driven by the economy a lot of the time. So I think we're going to find that you can't always force commercial to come first. And I'm not really sure how somebody wanted a guarantee of that in the town center. And while that's the goal, you can't, the market controls that.
No, I get it. I'm just trying to learn the history lesson.
And Mayor, if I can add, just with the RMU district, what's kind of difficult about that one is it was broken off and sold to property owners who do very specific things. So like the alloy, Edgewater, all those were sold off to individual developers that do that product. They're not, whereas the town center, Anderson, Geneva, is setting themselves up in a position where they're going to do a mixed-use project. It's one developer. It's not being broken off into several smaller parcels. So, and the code also does require it to some degree. And so, whereas the RMU code, it just limited the residential, put a unit number cap on it, but it didn't actually require mixing uses. It wasn't as strong of a code.
I must say, having watched Jake, this is the second time I've watched the numbers that Jake put together, and I'm becoming more and more convinced that that's a reasonable incentive to get the mixture we're looking for.
God.
Yeah, I think, I've been stumped, honestly, why we're not getting any commercial to come, I'm just going to say it that way, because Utah County is a hotbed of it, right? And we're really missing it, but there is, I feel, there is some urgency for Vineyard to really get going behind this before the point of the mountain and Draper, and the whole prison thing, because that's our competition. We've got to get going. We've got to get traction going with some of this, and somebody in it, and it may have to be Pete. Somebody's going to have to step up, and if we have to get somebody to spec a building and try to get some of it going, we've got to do that, or we're gonna be on the short end of this. And other cities, you start to look at what's happened in Pleasant Grove all of a sudden. So stuff is happening, and it's happening around us, and it's close. We've just got to get across the threshold, and to me, if this now creates the real synergy in a downtown and it gets people to come off of that, then again, that's one more reason I feel like I'm supportive of it, and I'm supportive of it now to create that urgency to get going.
I agree, and I also believe that if we do it across the Vineyard connector, that it will help the areas to the south, because sometimes you get to this point and people think you're kind of falling off the edge, but if you take care of the area to the north, everything fills in the center of it. But the last thing I wanted to say, so as you look at TOD sites all over, some of the people up here said that they had traveled to different TOD sites. So if you compare those transit-oriented developments that are by freeways, transportation like the Front Runner light rail, you will find that the percentages are really high for residential around these areas with economic development near them. So the residential always tends to be higher than the economic development to drive the economic development, because they need the people to walk around it. My curiosity for you was how you got the numbers, because when I have looked at the developments around, you mentioned Portland, when I looked at Portland, Kansas City, New York, Boston, just other areas, Knoxville, Nashville, other areas that have smaller, more rural areas to more city areas, they're in the 75 to 80% range. But the reason why I say it is because when you look at them, their calculations often go off of what type of transportation is there in the TOD. And for us right now, we have the front runner, we have the light rail, we have possible bus, and we have this little freeway coming in. So I think your questions were really pertinent. They were some of mine, and I think it was really important. But I wondered, had you been able to look at any of these numbers? Because for me, when I went and found them, I found that especially because we have the other multimodal hub in the valley next to Provo, it calculated out. The ratios made sense.
Well, I can see that, and I appreciate that, and I hope it works. One of my concerns about from the other places is I thought they had a better mix of population of different different pay levels and age as well in those areas, and so and we're looking, we're being pressured a lot to create a lot of low cost housing. There are lots of pressures on that, and so I'm afraid that if we don't make sure we have a good mix of the kinds of housing we're offering, that we won't be able to make that formula work for us.
Yeah, that is a good point. I think right now our mean income is around $90,000 in the city, and that puts us at a pretty good threshold. But as we build out the city center, I think you're right. I think having mandates to do affordable housing where we are doing low-cost housing can be difficult. I think when you're talking about moderate income, however, there are more, it's more average income for nurses, teachers, police officers, firefighters. So I don't think it's necessarily going to lower the mean income. I think where you did make a point though was that we do live in a student population, so that's always going to affect us. But something that makes us have a great city center is that those young people coming in and those talents fill the jobs that will raise that mean income. That's how I see it as far as transit-oriented developments. But I just wanted to clarify and make sure that I knew what you were talking about before I felt comfortable with going forward. So thank you. Thank you for the questions. Anybody else have any comments before we close? Okay. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that we approve the Town Center Master Development Agreement 3.1.
Second.
Is this done by roll call?
I made a few comments of changes that we wanted to make, so just note that we've got the changes as presented.
Yeah, Jake, was me stating that into the record enough for the additional? Okay.
So Morgan has the change of the code for the lakefront commercial and promenade area identified as the civic center area.
Yes.
And then we've got the items I addressed that are not currently red lines in the agreement. Do you want me to restate those?
Can we just say as stated in the record so we don't need to say it all and then we can go back? Is that okay, David?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And this is, you seconded?
I did.
Okay. This is done by roll call. Nate?
Are you at 4,000 units the way that we ended now?
Yes, as is.
You don't want to go to 45? No. Okay. Nate?
Yay.
Tice? Yay. Chris?
Yay.
John?
Yay.
Okay, carried. Can I have a motion to adjourn? And a
Second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pam, do you need time to switch over to our next meeting?